Good afternoon, and this is Daniel Cutright. Hope everybody is doing well, or it might be morning for some of you guys by the time you're watching this. I don't think we have anybody that's watching live that I know of other than me and Jeff. But I'm here with the man himself, Mr. Jeff Alston, and we're gonna just take a few minutes to chat with you today. This is to give you guys some background. This is the first time that we're doing one of these. We might turn this into a podcast. We might put it on YouTube. We don't really know yet. We're going to see where it goes. I don't even have a title for this. And so maybe that can be some audience feedback that you guys submit some different ideas and we'll figure out what to call this thing. But really where the idea came from is my background is athletics and running. I've been a runner for years. And so a lot of times my best ideas come when I'm out running, and I was out on a run one day and just started thinking about just all the different people that, I've had the privilege to get to know, and just started realizing that I know a lot of people that do things that are a little bit outside of the box, whether that be small business owners or, people that have pursued athletic careers or philanthropy or whatever it is. And I just got to thinking, man, it'd be really cool to have almost a conversation series with some of these folks, because I believe we learn through stories, and I think we can learn a lot from just hearing people's backgrounds. And I was doing this almost as much for selfish reasons as anything, because I like learning from people. I like nothing more than hearing people's stories and where they came from and kind of how they got to where they are today. And so this is really meant to be organic. I told Jeff before we were chatting a little bit before we jumped on the call here that we don't have a lot scripted, if anything, really, because it's just really a conversation. But really, Jeff, maybe what I'll do is if you just want to introduce yourself really quick, just to give people your background. I know Jeff currently works with the FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and him and I have known each other for quite some time. I was a lot shorter and didn't have any facial hair when we knew each other. I was still a kid watching my dad coach, and Jeff was out there coaching with him. So I'm really excited to have Jeff on here today.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. I am Jeff Alston. If you've known me for the last 20 years, you may have known me as Coach Alston. Growing up here in Louisa County, used to be a rural area that I grew up. It's grown up a lot, but it's still home. And I left it for a little bit, but was able to return. And after I grew up and realized my passion for coaching, wanted to come back and pour into our community.
That's awesome. Yeah, I also grew up in Louisa, so I think anybody that did so can certainly relate to what it's like out there. So I mentioned earlier too, I've known you since you were coaching in Louisa, but maybe talk about too, and you'll resonate with some of the folks that are in Louisa. Or some people, oftentimes when I say where I'm from, people have no idea where it's at. So I just, I end up saying between Richmond and Charlottesville. It's easier for people. So maybe just talk about real quick, what was it like growing up for you in Louisa County?
Yeah, so flashing way back to my childhood, I had a 1-hour bus ride to and from school. So usually getting on the bus before the sunrise and, just trying to, either do homework or play cards or do something to pass the time on the way till you got to school. And I respond to people in the exact same way. When people say, "Where is Louisa?" I say, right smack in the middle of Richmond and Charlottesville. But that was kind of the blessing too, because it was, you had country living, but if you wanted to be in the city, you could drive 35 minutes in either direction and get the city life of Charlottesville, the college town of UVA, or be in Richmond. Kind of had the best of both worlds growing up where we did.
Absolutely. So you're in Louisa, and then talk about maybe how you got into coaching. Did you start doing that right out of high school, or what did that kind of look like for you?
Yeah, so I had a personal training business actually coming out of high school. I got nationally certified in fitness counseling and personal training. And during that time, I was asked by one of the coaches in Louisa to come and design a strength and conditioning program for the basketball program. So I did, and as time went on, excuse me, Sorry about that. It's
You're
time
good. I like the coach mug too. That's good.
Absolutely. As years passed, I was asked if I wanted to coach something I was passionate about most of my life, and that was football. And during that same year, I was approached by the Jerry Cutright, and was given an opportunity to coach track. And I've always had a passion for sports. And coming out of high school, I wasn't quite big enough to be a football player. As a coach, I've taken on the size that I needed in high school, but I've always in life appreciated the fact there's opposition in everything we do, and that really just speaks volumes to why I started coaching, because I don't think there's any greater model of how to approach life than attacking the opposition, and to be able to teach that to young people and develop them. I was blessed to be able to start that at an early age. And if I'm being transparent, I definitely didn't know everything I should have known when I started coaching. I was given an opportunity, and I was able to live out my passion and share that with younger people. But the older I got, and as my faith grew along with that, it changed my why to how I coached and why I was doing it on a daily basis.
That's awesome. I know my dad can relate to the same things as far as just the opportunity to invest into young people. And, I remember you telling me a story one time actually about how you started coaching wrestling. And
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken, you didn't even have a wrestling background, did you?
No, not at all.
No. So you'd never done anything in wrestling, and you were approached to do that. And you had some success doing it, if I'm not mistaken. And how was it? I think because a lot of times people think when you're getting into coaching, you need to have had played the sport or been successful in the sport. But, you see coaches sometimes that's really not the case. You look at a guy like Buzz Williams, formerly Virginia Tech, now at Texas A&M, who, he was never a basketball player, but clearly he's coached at, some really great programs. So what would you say was it that helped you to be able to step into a sport that, you really didn't have that experience in, but really connect with those young people?
Well, it's as any coach will tell you, it's all about relationships, and that was something I definitely had a knack for, to build a relationship and connect with any kid of any background. As you know, in Louisa, we're kind of a melting pot, for ethnicity, for speaking racially. We're really in a fantastic area, and for whatever reason, I think a lot of it's my upbringing, just to be able to develop that relationship with a kid. And to be transparent, I didn't want to coach wrestling when they approached me. I didn't, for that very reason, because I didn't have a background in it. I'm the youngest of 5 children. One of them happened to be a all-state wrestler, and so I had to defend myself against him a lot. But so more than I realized. But as I came into it, and my original role was going to be like a strength and conditioning coach, and I had trained wrestlers at that time, and I understood the nutritional background of it, and but that lasted about 2 weeks, and next thing I know, I'm demonstrating fundamentals on the mat. So that's kind of how it started. And in everything I do, I just try to, a weird word you don't hear in sports is love, and I try to teach all the teams that I've connected with to love at the highest level, because when you love something or someone, you fight for that someone. And even though it's a football quote, I always thought a great quote for wrestling from the great Vince Lombardi was individual commitment to a group effort. So you're an individual on the mat, but you're out there fighting for your team. So I think I was successful on that end. But that was the same ingredient I used in football, which I did have knowledge about, the same ingredient I used to be a throwers coach. Billy Graham said this. He said, a coach will impact more young people in a year than the average person will in a lifetime. And
Mm.
I wasn't able to wrap my head around that in my early years of coaching, but the older I got, I truly grew an appreciation for that statement.
That's really awesome. You said a couple of things there, and I think that is something that's overlooked when you talk about love. And I remember specifically after Clemson won their first national championship with Dabo Swinney, in his post-game interview, he talked about that. He said that his guys, they built their program around just loving and supporting each other. And, from my experience, even coaching at the high school level, I quickly learned that, and it's funny, there's a local coach, a guy by the name of Winston Brown, who's over at Fort Union Military Academy. And he told me one time when I was going into exercise physiology, and he said, Daniel, it's great to know exercise physiology. He said, but don't become an exercise physiologist in the context of coaching. And what he meant by that was, I think it's kind of cliche, but athletes really only care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? They're going to buy into something that's it's a bigger purpose, and it really becomes a psychology game and how you're able to connect with these athletes. And clearly, what I observed from you is just being able to transcend across different sports. It comes back to really more the mindset and the individual athletes themselves, and really the kind of the psychology behind that. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead. You're going to add something on to that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the power plays we run with Fellowship of Christian Athletes, I get to coach the coach, and we can talk about that more down later in the interview. But to be a three-dimensional coach, I think in my older years of coaching, I learned to develop that, and that's coaching the mind, body, and the spirit of the athlete. And if I'm being real, the first few years I was very one-dimensional. So I think it came from being around superb coaches such as your dad and the Coach Pelotes of the world, and just people that truly understand that relationship between a coach and an athlete. So to be able to have mentors like that in my younger years of coaching really helped develop how I coach.
Do you have mentors now?
Yeah, one of them doesn't know it, but I definitely adapt to Dabo Swinney. He's actually going to be on a FCA huddle tonight on YouTube Live, telling his story a little bit. But he's, whether he wins or loses, Tony Dungy's also going to be on that huddle up. And those two personalities, the thing I always respected, whether they win or lose, you almost can't tell based on their reaction. How they respond to and how they handle victory speaks volumes. So as I got older, I tried to model after that. But locally, I would definitely still say your dad. He pushes hard, but I feel like he lives out that three-dimensional concept. As a coach, in addition to loving that athlete, your job as a coach is to get the absolute best you can out of that individual, so that they can, a team is, a group of individuals that come together to compete for a cause greater than that of themselves. So the more you can get that intentional relationship piece down and draw out the absolute best, because my job as a coach is not to see them for the athlete they are, but the athlete that they can become.
That's so good. That's so good. What was one of your maybe most memorable or best experiences as a coach, if you have to think back?
There's lots, but first gut reaction would be 2011. We had the earthquake, and we had lost our school. I still laugh. One of the teams we competed against was a Northern Virginia team. They came down on their really fancy charter bus, and I was the first one to greet them. And I said, "Coach, do you need anything?" He said, "Yeah, we could use a locker room." And I said, "Yeah, so could we." and as he looked around at the, literally the rumble, the piles of bricks and mortar that were just what used to be a school, he said, I'm truly sorry. And I said, don't be. You know, we're learning a lot. We still have each other. And, you know, my words came back to me. At the time, I thought I was just talking about a game. And I sat my team down and I talked to them that year about being an overcomer and beating the odds. You know, when no one expects anything of you, how will you respond? You know, will you just take the excuse that people are going to give you, or are you going to rise to the challenge? And as I said those words, one of the captains that year graduated 3 years later, ended up being the valedictorian of his class. And he repeated that same speech that I gave. And he talked about how that would impact his life, knowing, you know, he hoped that he wouldn't face any more earthquakes, but if life did throw a curveball at him, he knew that he had the strength, the inner strength, and the faith to overcome the obstacles that would be thrown at him. And the other lesson I think that was learned that year, they were by far not the most talented group I had, not even close. And we ended up going undefeated that season and winning the championship. But one of the things we did is we served our community. We lost our high school and one of our elementary schools. And one of the elementary schools they were renovating, we just got on a bus and we went over and helped move the furniture back in to prepare for that school year. And the happiness and the joy that I saw in our team that day from learning and living out being a servant, you know, in your community, I think it really changed the chemical makeup of our team. And that kind of re-edifies that word love. They saw each other in a different light other than just between the whistles and the grind being on the battlefield or the gridiron. They saw what it was like to make a difference in somebody's life. And I really think that type of bonding experience completely transcended us from being an okay, average, hardworking team to a superb team that didn't lose. So that would be, like I said, when you do anything for 20 years, you're going to have stories, but that one got it to me the most, I would say.
That's awesome. There's so much good stuff in what you said. And I think that message is so timely, even in the circumstances that we're in now. You know, everybody's working through the COVID-19 crisis, and it's new territory. And, I think what you said about how are you going to respond when people don't expect anything of you, I think a lot of times people can find themselves in that place. That's so powerful to be able to use that to overcome, and just the life lessons that I know you left with those kids. That's huge. So fast forward now, moving from coaching, which 20 years of experience doing that, and then you made a career shift that a lot of times any kind of big shift like that, it's scary for people. You went from coaching to now you're working with Fellowship of Christian Athletes. A little bit different role from what you've done before. And, for you, talk about, was that a scary transition? Why did you make the switch?
Just to be real, it was a calling. I had volunteered for Fellowship of Christian Athletes in a multi-sport huddle at Louisa High School for quite a few years. And kind of like we do in life, I reached a platform in my life that I was happy and everything was good, but I began asking that question of what more should I be doing? And if I transition this into a faith talk, I just plain and simple hit my knees and ask God, what more can I do? How can I serve you? And within a couple days, at church, he kind of met me where I was, and he encouraged me to get out of the boat and stop just talking about my faith and show my faith. And 2 days later, I get a call from an area director of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes asking if I would pray about coming on full staff. Ironically, they said my name had surfaced from other coaches that were probably coaches that I coached against. And, if you'd asked me 5 years ago if that would have been an easy transition, I would have said no way. But I had a peace about it and it wasn't easy. Um, there was definitely a season of being stretched, and but kind of like working out, the more we get stretched and pushed, and that's how we grow the muscle, right? And I feel like that's kind of what formulated when I made that decision. I knew it was I knew I had to be obedient to my call. And so when I made that transition, there were definitely valleys. There were times where, you're scratching your head. You're like, man, was this the right move? I gave up a full-time job with benefits, and my wife didn't even have a full-time job at the time. And a lot of, in a world such as this, people are looking at me going, that's so irresponsible. And I'm like, but my calling wasn't from the world. My calling was from my God. And so I really, I took that serious. And I think the more people saw that around me, the more they bought into, this guy's for real, and it really, everybody kept saying, the people that knew me best, they wasn't a financial concern. It was, how are you going to not coach? You've been doing, how are you not going to be on the sidelines at a football game? And the truth is, I can still be on the sidelines, just not a traditional coach when it comes to X's and O's. Now I get to coach the coach and live out that whole three-dimensional coaching system, and to be able to pour that into other coaches and have that transition into their athletes. So the transition, there were bumps in the roads, for sure, but I had to live out what I told that 2011 team. When the world said that I couldn't do it, I had to overcome, because nobody promises easy or a happy life. You have to go out and make that choice. You have to choose to be happy. You have to choose to work hard to get what you want to get out of life, and to know your purpose in the process, and my purpose is hopefully just to inspire others to walk in their purpose. So.
That's really great. That's awesome. When you think about talking, you mentioned in there, you said actually starting to live on your faith. I think a lot of times people, they talk about faith, or, when people think about sometimes making a transition, whether it's starting a small business or doing something, you get a lot of people, they always talk about doing something different, but they find themselves in a comfort zone where they can almost kind of poke a stick at whatever it is that they think they want to do. You were in a position where you mentioned your wife didn't have a job at the time, and you kind of had to go all in, and it really was a test of faith for you. Do you think in a way that almost made getting off the ground with what you're doing with FCA easier because you really didn't have a choice?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that statement you made, all in, that's another phrase we used in coaching all the time. You can't, if you're going to be dedicated to your sport, or to your job, whatever the case may be, you got to be all in, and I learned very quickly that this wasn't a transition that I could sit around for 3 years hoping prayers and finances would come and lift me up for my profession. It was, I had to be obedient to the calling, and I would just have to say that's definitely what inspired me, was just to be all in, and knowing that impact of and that blessing and that joy that I get to be a part of something so great as the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, to be able to reach every coach and to reach every athlete, but as I look at it, I think about, we've talked about the great coaches I've had. I've seen the not so good coaches too during my time, not necessarily in my neighborhood, but in other school systems and colleges and pros. And the more you can develop a coach to be a better husband, to be a better spiritual leader in his home, to have stability within his house, the better coach he's going to be. Because if he's unstable at home, that carries into your teams, right? So for me, I've always had that passion, but to be able to receive that calling and do it full time, that was easy.
That's awesome. So you're working with FCA now. You've had this background of, obviously you've loved the opportunity to invest into young people, but now you're getting to invest not only into young people, but into other coaches as well, and really give back in that way. Talk about maybe just, some of the things that you're really excited about, the initiatives that you have going on with FCA now, and, kind of the direction that you guys are headed.
Yeah. So to quote a former director in FCA, he professed to me on the front end, he said, we used to try to stretch to fit, and now we're shrinking to grow. And, I was initially set up to have a 4-county territory, and Louisa is 1,600 square miles. We serve over 800 athletes and over 60 coaches, and I thought, man, that's just a one high school town, Spotsylvania is also part of that territory, and, there's multiple high schools. So at first it was a little overwhelming, but we've since dialed it back to allow me to focus primarily on Louisa and Orange County, to develop coaches there and treat the coach almost the same way I did the athlete, to just take the time and meet them where they're at, which is what you hear Coach Sweeney say all the time. He was a big FCA guy. Clemson has one of the largest FCA campuses in the country. At least that's what Coach Sweeney told me. So, it was, so knowing I have that, to be able to transition from, I thought I had a big platform in coaching, but if you use a multiplication factor, I averaged 50 football players over the years, sometimes less, sometimes more. But if I have the opportunity to minister to and through 10 other coaches and they have 50, my platform just grew to 500. And,
wow.
And you and I have had conversations in the past about duplication, and it's, we can just encourage others to do what's right and be all in, and to be able to duplicate that within your other coaches. It makes for a very successful team in a lot of cases.
Yeah, that's so true. It's I often use the quote, J. Paul Getty talked about, I'd rather have 1% of 100 man's efforts than 100% of my own. And I think oftentimes that's the transition that people have to make is, especially I remember even early on in coaching or other things that I was pursuing, you think you have to be the magic behind everything. But when you start making that shift and you realize that you can use your gifts to equip other people, then it's not about you, right? It's about those other people that can take that same influence and make an impact. Absolutely.
Yeah. The years I was very successful as far as records go and wins and losses, I have to say I was surrounded by great assistant coaches. I've heard Coach Sweeney say this too. If you're the head coach, you get way too much credit for the victory and way too much blame for the loss. And I think that's absolutely true in life. If we take a team approach and work with one another, what better time than to exercise that right now, with the virus to go to serve people, and to be able to, if you're stuck in a funk, I think one of the greatest ways to get through that is to go out and serve somebody else, and we can teach coaches and athletes that and model that to the community. It's great stuff.
So much value in that. What would be, maybe just kind of as we start to wind down here a little bit, Jeff, what would be maybe just one tip that you would give somebody that is looking to start a new endeavor, somebody that's maybe they're not sure how to start, or they're just trying to, find the courage or the backing to get going on it? What would be one tip that you would give somebody in that situation?
Yeah, for me, it's my faith, but I would encourage somebody, they got to have that belief system in place, because you're going to have so many people in the world telling you what you can and can't do. And, there's multiple successful business owners, that have come out of, poverty. They've come out of having nothing. Dabo Sweeney talks about that. I know he keep talking about him, but he is somebody I really think a coach could model themselves after. When he talked about FCA, met him where he was at. He had an unstable home life. In fact, was all considered homeless at one point, you know, and there was somebody that reached out to him and showed him care and love, you know, and they taught him that he had value. And if somebody didn't take the time to do that, he wouldn't be where he is right now. And you look at him now, he's, you know, multiple national championship coach and several times coach of the year. But if you meet him in the street, he's just humble, you know. There's never the attitude of, man, I told you I was going to do it. You know, it was never that. And inside he might have been thinking that, you know, but he had a belief system. And that's my point, I guess, Daniel. And the big response to that is you got to model what my dad taught me. He died the night before my 21st birthday, but what he modeled daily was to believe in God, believe in yourself, and work hard to get what you want out of life. He didn't say work hard to get what the world says you should have. He said work hard to get what you want out of life, you know. And when you know what that purpose is, you develop your why, and then your what pushes into the why, you know. It's just yeah, I mean, I think that's it. That's my big tip. That's my 5-minute response of you got to believe, you know, because there's going to be other people that don't believe in what you're doing. But if your belief says that I'm going to add value to the world, because let's face it, we can't fix a world that's broken. We can't, but we can develop better people for the world.
So good, man. So good. Well, I know you're making a difference. I've always loved sports and coaching. You know, I've heard this statement that sports is a microcosm of life. And, you know, when you have your coaches in an organization like FCA, you now put in that mentorship into this microcosm of life to really guide these athletes and these coaches and, you know, one person at a time. And then you're duplicating that thought process. You get people that, you know, they're able to be out there making a difference. So that's awesome, man. I know you're definitely a difference maker, and what you're doing is super awesome. But you know, as we just kind of close and wrap this up, how can people find out more about what you're doing? How can they follow you, or if they wanted to reach out, what's some ways they can get in touch?
Yeah, so you could go to my org, kind of highlights what we're about, and that's my.fca.org/Jeff Alston. You can email me, jalston@fca.org. Those are 2 quick ways to just reach out, and I kind of like you're doing here. I'd love to just hear your story. You know, if, you can read a little blurb about my story, or you can watch this Zoom if you get the opportunity. But yeah, I would encourage you to reach out. I'm a people person. I love people. So, you know, just like being a coach, I'm all about relationships. So, I got a coach allowing me to use his Wi-Fi. Just walked by me.
I think I know that guy.
Yeah. So,
I think I played for him.
Yeah. But yeah, please reach out. Like I said, I'm happy to share in depth my story, and I'd love to hear your story. We can have coffee and Jesus.
Amen, man. Hey, awesome. Well, it's been awesome having you on here. This is going to get uploaded and posted to maybe YouTube and some other platforms, and so I know people will really enjoy just hearing the message that you have, Jeff. It's been great. So appreciate you jumping on today. Man,
thank you for the opportunity, man.
Absolutely. Good deal. Well, stay in touch. And this is episode 1. Like we said, we'll be doing this again. I know that we've got some other individuals lined up that I'm super excited about you guys getting to hear from, and we'll see what this turns into. So once again, submit any ideas that you may have for what we can call this thing. But the whole message, and hopefully you got it today, is, you know, positive ideas, people that are doing things that are a little bit outside of the box, and hopefully that can inspire and encourage you to pursue the things that you want to pursue as well. So appreciate it again, Jeff.
Absolutely. If I could, I want to give one final quote. and this is a Jeff Alston original.
Okay.
In the time of being socially distanced, you don't have to be socially disconnected.
Amen. That's so true. So true. Well, appreciate it, brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right.